In 1 Nephi chapter 19, verse 23, we read, "And I did read many things unto them which were written in the books of Moses, but that I might more fully persuade them to believe in the Lord their Redeemer, I did read unto them that which was written by the prophet Isaiah. For I did liken all scriptures unto us, that it might be for our profit and learning." A very important concept to understand, especially when reading the first books of Moses and the first books of Nephi, is the overarching narrative that runs through our lives. Drawing from the Genesis story and applying it broadly, we learn that there is always an exodus, an expedition, and an entrance. Adam and Eve's exodus led them out into the lone and dreary wilderness, where their expedition, or in other words, their journey in the wilderness of affliction, as Liken coined the phrase, became a proving ground where they learned by sad experience to keep God's commandments, and whose law became their schoolmaster and their instructions on arriving at the veil to then enter his presence. This exodus from a native environment is designed this way by God to teach his children how to grow into godly people in order to facilitate an entrance into his presence, or in other words, a promised land. We see the story played out in the temple endowment ceremony, which is designed to teach you this and is not the end in and of itself. You are supposed to then take what you learned and go and do it in your life. This is played out in the Old Testament when the Israelites departed Egypt and traveled toward the promised land. That expedition should have taken days, but because of their idolatry and their hard hearts, God caused them to wander decades longer than they should have if they had kept their promise to keep the Lord's covenant. We see the same story played out in the Book of Mormon with Lehi's exodus from Jerusalem with his family into the wilderness. They had the benefit of knowing that this story had already been experienced by their ancestors who were led out of Egypt by Moses. The entire first book of Nephi can be viewed as a temple endowment ceremony, both figuratively and literally. Lehi suffered through a real physical wilderness and also a figurative personal wilderness, as did Nephi and the others. They also had the benefit of the lesson learned by the dream which Lehi had of the tree of life. As long as they pressed forward along the iron rod, they could eventually arrive at the tree of life. Likewise, through their faith, the Liahona functioned to point them directly toward the promised land in America. You have probably left your parents' home and have gone out into the world. Each of us is undergoing our own expedition, or in other words, our wilderness of affliction. But how many of us are seeking Christ's face? How many of us are eagerly reaching to partake of the fruit of the tree of life? How many of us are asking and seeking and knocking that we may converse with the Lord through the veil? If you are not doing this, then I suggest that you might as well have learned nothing in the temple. And you might as well never partake of the fruit of the tree of life, like Laman and Lemuel didn't. And you will wander in your wilderness of affliction until you die, just as the Lord caused that first generation of Israelites to die before allowing their children to enter the promised land. Don't make this mistake. Start now and go on until you find yourself entering the presence of Jesus Christ and arriving at your promised land.